Hi guys. Um, I wanted to post um, a gift I got in the mail. But first and foremost, please subscribe to my channel down below and like it because it helps my channel grow. Because I need to grow because I need Operation Christmas Child to be funded. All right? Well, first and foremost, I was surprised to get this letter today. Well, I don't know if it's a letter. It's bigger than a letter. I'll show it to you. She was Josh's mom. I think this is the book she wrote about him in. So we'll see. I'm gonna open it up and you guys can experience it with me, just as I am. It's so weird seeing the address on here because I don't know. It's weird because I miss him a lot. And a lot of people do in our aphasia group. A lot of people. Hold on, I'll get this open. Just bear with me a second. It's the book. This is the book. Nancy Sophia Smith wrote this book. God gives grace. God gives perfect gifts. James 1:17. About the author. Nancy Sophia Smith has served in the ministry alongside her husband for 50 years. Her husband, as a retired pastor from Buckley Road Baptist Church in Liverpool, New York, in 2020 after 40 years. He is now pastor emeritus and their son Travis is their pastor. Nancy graduated from Baptist Bible College in Springfield, Missouri in 1975. She and her husband have 3 sons, 2 of whom are pastors. They have 10 grandchildren. Nancy is officially retired as a nationally certified interpreter for the deaf and continues to be involved in the deaf ministry. She enjoys gardening, sewing, playing piano, and interior decorating, and pickleball. I'll show you a little picture of her. This is her. I want to see about her son. Well, I want to find the part that talks about Josh. Wow, there's a lot of stuff in here. I'll have to go farther back in the book. Hmm. Well, hold on. I'm going to put you on pause. Well, this is what she wrote. The suitcase. Okay, the suitcase. We arrived home from our ladies' trip Saturday night. There were always things to do on a Saturday night to prepare for Sunday. That Saturday was no different. Now my normal MO after coming home from a trip is to unpack my suitcase. For whatever reason I hadn't unpacked this time is a mystery to me, but there the suitcase sat untouched. Early Monday morning I wanted to go for a pool workout at my gym, but the pool was closed for repair. So I went to another gym about 20 minutes from my home. I did my hour-long routine as usual, then went home. It was a beautiful day when I pulled up into the driveway. I saw some things I needed to be taken care of in the yard before I went into the house. When I finally entered the house, I decided to look at my cell phone. There was an urgent message for me to call my oldest son's boss in Albany. I could not imagine what she wanted to say. Josh was working in Vermont. So I made a call to Maggie, and she informed me that Josh had a brain aneurysm rupture in Albany, and that I was to call the doctor immediately. I must have gone into shock. The first thing I did was call my husband. Cell phone. He did not answer. I left a frantic message for him to come home right away. My husband was still working part-time at the church. Travis, my second oldest son, was now the pastor of our church. He took up the reins when my husband retired. So I thought Travis would know where to find his dad, but he didn't know where he was. I told Travis about Josh. He was devastated. The only thing our family knew about people that had brain aneurysms was that they died. I then called the phone number of the doctor Maggie had given me. The doctor answered right away and told me that Josh would be going into surgery and to pack a suitcase, as we were 2.5 hours drive away. He told us to get there as soon as possible and that Josh would probably still be in surgery when we arrived. Just as I got off the phone, my husband burst through the door and into my arms. I could hardly get the words out of my mouth again. We held each other tight, trembling and crying at the thought of our losing our son. I said the doctor said to pack to hold on. To pack a suitcase. I went to my room and there was my suitcase, all packed. It normally would have been unpacked and stored in the basement by then, but there it was, all packed with my toiletries and everything I needed for a trip. The only thing I had to do was put in a few pairs of capris and tops. We were out the door in no time. It wasn't until later, when my daughter-in-law Melissa asked me how I packed so fast, that I realized God had let me off unpacking for just that reason. It was another perfect gift from God, had already had for me before I even needed it. This is sorry. Red poppies and a grand piano. The 2.5 hour drive to Albany Medical Center was was a long, quiet drive. We were both praying and could hardly talk. We had arrived at the hospital. We were told to wait in the waiting room as my son was still in surgery. When the doctor finally did come out, he told us that the surgery itself was successful. But then he said, "I'm sorry." It was clear that he doubted Josh would make it. We were told we would be informed when we could see him in the ICU. NICU, Neuro Intensive Care Unit, after he was situated. Then it was time to head to his room. We walked through a series of hallways. Each sign had red poppies on it. Red poppies are Josh's favorite flowers. It was strange to see a grand piano at the entrance of the NICU. Josh was a professional pianist. I felt like God was just letting me know that Josh was in the right place. Here's a little picture of the poppies and the piano. A place to stay. We entered the hospital room, yearning to see our son again. A place to stay. We entered the hospital room, yearning to see our son again. He was lying there in a coma, connected to so many machines. The doctor came in and told us that Josh had no brain activity. At that point, I just assumed we were there to say goodbye. I sat there waiting for them just to pull the plug. As I prayed and told God that I knew that He knew what was best and would accept whatever was His will. That's when the doctor said that it was a touch and go situation. Hospital regulations require us to leave at 8 p.m. Our son Travis and his wife Melissa were already headed to Albany when we told them that we would be too late to see Josh by the time they arrived. So they turned around and went back home. That afternoon, we received a call from a former deacon and his wife, Jerry and Pam Calabrese, who had moved to Oklahoma. They informed us that they had bought a mobile home in Albany area near their oldest daughter and that we could stay with them. They had just arrived there from Oklahoma, where their youngest daughter lived. They hadn't planned to be back in New York for another 2 weeks. But plans got changed with their son's wife, who was due to have a baby, had made plans for his wife's mother to go there and stay, so they came back to New York a week earlier. Well, we didn't want to leave the hospital at all, but the rules were that we couldn't see Josh till 10 a.m. the next morning. Pam and Jerry had been great friends through the years, so we felt very comfortable staying with them. We didn't want to drive all the way back to Liverpool and then have to turn around the next morning to do that drive again. Pam and Jerry cried and prayed with us that night in their home. The next morning, they prepared breakfast for us. During our stay, they provided all our needs. Little did we know that we would be staying with them for 5 weeks. We later found out that the cost of a hotel next to the hospital was $500 a night. So we were very, hold on. So we were very thankful that we had a place to stay. It was a perfect gift. The hem. It had been 5 days since the whole ordeal began. We had requested that hymns be played for Josh 24/7. Josh has a running fever and shivering. He had been having spasms in his brain for the past 2 days. His body was swollen. His fingers and toes were cold and rigid. And his arms were outstretched in the front of his body. Hold on. His arms were outstretched in front of his body, like a Frankenstein's monster. He did not move. When I would open his eyelids, his eyes would dart around like a lizard's eyes. He had been about the same since day one, but that day seemed a bit different. Seemed a bit worse. As I stood at his bedside, near his head, I would pray. Watching my son, hooked up to all the machines, was almost unbearable. It seemed as though nothing was happening except for watching him die, day after day. I prayed and I told God that I just couldn't keep doing this every day. At that exact moment, the hymn began to play in his room, day by day. Yes, God, I said, I can do this today. I understand that all I needed was strength for that day, and that God would provide. It was a perfect gift from God. He answered me through the hymn, day by day. And I won't read this part. It's all about the hymn. And the person who wrote it was Lena Sandelberg in 1865, after her father had drowned. It was a hymn of assurance and expresses trust in God through all of life's circumstances. A week had passed. The nurse said that day 5 through 12 would be much the same. The doctor said that Josh was still not out of the woods. During that time, Josh had several procedures on his brain to help blood flow. He experienced more spasms in his brain. The procedures were dangerous, as they could cause blindness. He was on a cooling machine for fevers, so he was always shivering. They continued to pinch and try to cause pain to Josh hourly in order to get a reaction from him, but he never flinched. His legs had stiffened up. We would try to work them to regain flexibility. We would work his arms too. They were swollen. I felt encouraged when I saw him draw his arms up his side, but the doctor told me that was just an indication of brain damage. He reiterated that Josh would never be able to walk, care for himself, or ever be able to communicate again, just as the other doctors had told us previously. Still, we had to try. His body continued to torque and some movements over and over again. At times, he would open his eyes, but he was not really there. Monday would mark 3 weeks of being in the NICU. 21 days is a normal minimum for being in that unit before transferring them over to ICU. During those weeks, we had seen multiple families leaving the unit in tears as their loved ones had died. Josh was still having basal spasms in the artery in his brain. The doctor arranged a meeting with family to discuss Josh's situation, as it seemed things were not improving. The doctor ran more tests on his brain to see if Josh was continuing to have spasms. He was preparing to tell us that there wasn't any hope of Josh recovering because of the continued spasms and that it was time to let him go. But when we met with him, he had said Josh wasn't having any more spasms and that he felt Josh had a 50-50 chance. My husband then told the doctor that we believed in the sanctity of life and that we were willing to give Josh that chance. We all left the meeting in kind of a shock. We didn't know how the end result would have to trust God for the outcome. All I knew was that I didn't want Josh to spend the rest of his life in a nursing home, unable to care for himself. Josh did have reflexes, so both OT and PT would come in and work on him. He would sometimes follow a few simple commands that the nurse would tell him to do, like sticking out his tongue, even though he was not awake. The nurses were always shouting at him, trying to get him to do things. But mostly there was no response. Day 21. Josh came off the ventilator. Whenever the nurses would decrease his anxiety medication, Josh would go into pure panic. They were trying to get him out of the coma state. Often on the 21st day, people wake up from their coma, but not Josh. Josh was born in 1976, 3.5 weeks, 24 days prematurely. Here it was day 24, and Josh woke up. As soon as Josh woke up, they got him standing and out of bed, then sitting in a chair. I was in shock. He seemed to understand everything and could nod yes and no. He was then able to move all his body parts on demand. When they put him back in bed, he seemed very agitated, so I played the song "It Is Well" for him on my phone. He opened his eyes wide, and a tear fell down his cheek. Then he drifted off to sleep. Later that day, Josh's brother Travis asked Josh if he could pray for him. Josh nodded his head yes. When Travis was finished praying, Josh used sign language to say thank you. As the nurse explained to Josh what was going on, he kissed her hand, and then he touched the pin on his head. They had done the brain surgery. She then put hand sanitizer in his hand because he had touched the pin on his head. She told him to rub his hands together, which he did. It had been a great day then. Josh's bladder would not empty out. He was writhing in pain. No amount of morphine could calm him down. It took an hour and a half before they could get a catheter in. 3 days later, Josh got moved to a step-down floor. He was in a ward and had a person assigned to him to keep an eye on him. Josh could suction out his own mouth now. It was Saturday, so we decided to go home for Sunday and come back on Monday. When we came back on Monday, they had already moved Josh into a private room. He could choke a lot on his own phlegm and then panic. It was hard to watch. The nurses would often come in and suction his trach. The trach and the catheter were both very uncomfortable for him. I would continue to play hymns for him, and sometimes he would move his fingers across the bed sheet as if he were playing the piano. We had been waiting all day for the caseworker to get back with us on both for Josh to go for rehab. It wasn't till later that night we found out Josh had been switched to another caseworker since he was moved to a new floor, so she hadn't even looked at his case yet. It was hard not to get discouraged. Josh could not communicate and would get very frustrated, would lash out when we couldn't understand him. He had his own language. I suctioned him out whenever he started choking, as they were very short-staffed and seemed to help calm him. He slipped between choking episodes. There were many rehab facilities all over the U.S., but finding one that would accept Josh and his insurance was a challenge. Some facilities would only keep him 13 days maximum. We could not figure out how only 13 days of rehab would be enough, as he could not walk, talk, eat, drink, or care for himself. We certainly did not want to place him in a nursing home. After a lot of searching and praying for days, we found a facility that we felt good about. It was only 2 hours and 11 minutes drive away. Sunnyview Rehabilitation Hospital in Schenectady, New York. The director came to evaluate Josh and was confident they could help him. They made plans for an ambulance to come and get him the very next day. We had our concerns. We would be too far away to continue to stay at Pam and Jerry's house. We were still 2 hours away from home. We had heard that Josh could only have one visitor per day because of the COVID pandemic. So Dan and I decided we would take turns driving there every day from our home. We felt like Josh needed us to be there for him. Wednesday, July 13th, the ambulance came to get Josh at noon. We stopped and had a nice dinner for lunch before heading over to the rehab hospital, as it would take time for Josh to get situated. It would be our last meal for the day. Visiting hours would be the same as they were at the previous hospital. All visitors had to leave by 8 p.m. When we arrived at Sunnyview Rehabilitation Hospital, they asked how far away we lived from there. That's when we found out that since we lived over 2 hours away, we could stay for free at Jack's place, which was across the street. Plus, since we would be staying in that house, they would allow both of us to be with Josh every day to help him with his rehab. What a perfect gift that was. I love how God works in so many ways, from leaving her to leave her suitcase as a gift, to having her friend call her and let her stay with them as a gift. All these little ways. Josh's first night at the rehab was a nightmare. Josh had a full-blown panic attack. He couldn't breathe. His heart was pounding. He was scared and mad, and we couldn't understand him. He couldn't talk, and he couldn't write. Nothing made sense to us as we tried to help him. The staff allowed us to stay until 9 that night to help him calm down. They gave him Seroquel at 8 to calm him, and took a full hour for it to kick in. It was still hard to leave him. Maybe Josh went into panic episodes because they deflated the balloon in his trach. I don't know, but they had to do that eventually to remove it. He was getting catheterized every 6 hours because he couldn't urinate on his own. He developed thrush from all the antibiotics he was on. A friend was supposed to bring Josh's toiletries and some clothes and shoes that day, but he had never showed up. We prayed that we would all be resolved soon. Everyone there seemed to question us about what we would do. From the hole, sometimes across the room, the trach would have made it easier to swallow. He began texting on his phone. Not sure what that looked like, but his printing was improving. The therapist's goal for Josh was to be able to go home with just the feeding tube and not the trach. My goal for him was to have neither when it was time to bring him home. He began fasting for that to happen. He worked well with the therapist, but his patience was thinner than with us. Facial expressions were beginning to come back. When I asked him to smile for a picture, he raised his eyebrows. During this whole ordeal, our daughter-in-law Melissa would keep all friends and family informed of Josh's status on Facebook. We received many cards, gifts, phone calls, texts, visits, and most importantly, prayers from all over the world. It was kind of our lifeline to the world. My husband and I could barely deal with the situation at hand and didn't have time or the emotional energy to help keep everyone that was concerned about Josh up to date on his recovery. We were so blessed to have Melissa in our family to do that for us. We began preparing our house for Josh to come home to recover. We had a railing installed on the front porch, ordered a shower chair, a chair to go over the toilet with handles. We installed a handheld shower head, got an armchair for the dining room. There was so much to be done there was so much to be done to get the guest room ready for him. It had almost been 2 months of Josh being in hospitals. Their projected date for him to come home was set for Thursday, August 11th. He was finally able to eat a tub of applesauce, pudding, and drink a glass of thickened juice without coughing. He was able to play the keyboard somewhat. The fact that he could do anything at all was amazing. Maggie Mansili Cahill, Josh's boss in Albany, would come when she could. Sometimes she would bring Lucy, Josh's multi-poo. Maggie was the first person to get Josh to smile. I didn't think he could anymore. It brought tears to my eyes. I missed his smiling face. I had to take time out from being with Josh to pack up his apartment in Albany. He had to be out by the end of the month, and I needed to have it all done before we took him home. All in all, I packed 100 boxes. Melissa helped when she could. Travis emptied out the storage unit, packed up all of Josh's groceries, clothes, into his truck to take to our house. I really was besides myself to put all of Josh's boxed items and all his furniture. I reached out to Josh's boss in Vermont, Kathleen Dolan, to see if she could have movers come and put all of Josh's belongings in storage in Vermont. She graciously paid for it all. There was so much to do at home to get ready for Josh's arrival. I had to sell the queen-size bed and get a twin bed for the room so Josh would have room to get around in the small room. The dressers had to be emptied. The guest room decor would have to be packed up. I had to get new bedding for the trundle beds that were donated to us from a family in our church. Our son Matt donated a chair for Josh's bedroom. The queen bed sold one day before we arrived back in Liverpool. We had to finish getting the room ready. The floor was all clean where the bed had been, except for one purple crayon lying on the floor. I just stared at that crayon as it brought tears to my eyes. The purple crayon was the name of the company that Josh worked for in Vermont. It seemed to be a sign to me that that's where Josh would be going back to someday. A few days passed. Josh's coughing was 94% less than it had been. He still had to have the feeding tube. We had no idea when it would come out. He was eating 3 pureed meals a day. He had lost over 40 pounds. We took Josh to see his neurosurgeon in Albany. Everyone in the office was thrilled to see him. After all, he was a miracle. All the doctors came in, took his picture, being amazed at his progress. Josh began seeing double, so the therapist at rehab had him wear a patch over his one eye, switching every 2 hours to correct that. It did. Josh's room in our house was finally ready for him to come home. I was still packing boxes and cleaning Josh's apartment. Josh was supposed to be discharged the next day. He still had a feeding tube and a trach. My husband would be going out of town that weekend, and I was just too scared to have him home by myself, so the hospital agreed to keep Josh until the following Tuesday. I was still fasting and praying for the feeding tube and trach to come out before bringing him home. It was the day before Josh was to come home with us, but he still had the trach and the feeding tube. He was eating all ground up food and taking medications with pudding. They agreed that Josh no longer needed to be fed through the feeding tube, but they would not take it out. They said the doctor put it in would be the one to take it out. They finally removed the trach, put a bandage over the hole in his throat. I was told how to keep the hole in his throat clean and was taught how to flush out the feeding tube twice a day until he could go see the doctor to take it out. Well, I was very happy not to have to deal with the feeding tube. Feeding Josh through the tube and felt comfortable enough to flush it out and mix his meds and water to put in the tube. The plan was to leave at 10 a.m. the next morning to take him home. The plan to have the feeding tube removed by the doctor would be in Albany in 3 weeks. Josh was looking forward to leaving Sunnyview. We said our goodbyes and thanked all the staff, nurses and therapists who worked with Josh, giving them Dunkin' Donuts gift cards. Josh's boss, Maggie, met us in the parking lot with Lucy, Josh's dog. She had been taking care of Lucy all these 10 weeks in the hospital. Our car was packed with all of Josh and Lucy's things. I was barely able to squeeze in the back seat. It was lunchtime when we left, so we grabbed a quick bite at Stewart's before a long 2-hour drive home. We finally made it home all together again. What a perfect gift that was. Florida. November 3rd, the day we left for the 2-day drive to Florida, Josh and Lucy traveled well. We would go to the mobile home we had purchased just the year before. It would be the perfect place for Josh to recover. He could easily walk there without all the New York winter and ice, snow to deal with. Here's a little picture of Josh. Well, when I went on, the next one is about the strawberry moon. And that is the end of the book. So those are the one of the, I am so glad she sent me this book. I loved hearing about him. But I do miss him very much. So, just so you guys know that I recognize missing my friend. And I want you guys to know that I appreciate you as well. And I'm going to let you guys go. And I hope his mom is doing well. And in the meantime, I hope that I know that Josh is doing well. So, on that note, I'm gonna go.